So good to be here again today, and I thank you for letting me come and share with you today. I will tell you that next week Dan will be here, and he will be filling this particular spot. And we look forward to hearing what God says to Dan to share with us next time. I'd like to sing a little song, and one that fits today, I think. I want us to share together. A little song called Sanctuary. We all know it. We've sung it together before. We don't need any accompaniment. We just sing it a cappella and listen to the greatest instruments that God has created. And that is the human voice. So let's sing together. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, with thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. I kind of feel like this morning, you've heard that old saying about preaching to the choir. Well, I kind of feel like that's what we're going to be doing today, because what I want to share with you is something I think that by and large you practice every day of your lives. And it's amazing to me to look around and see how many people do practice this thing and how little we hear about those people. But we hear an awful lot about folks who are selfish and stingy and grumpy and all that. So I want to talk this morning about loving one another, treating one another with love, and as the writer of Hebrews, whoever that might have been, says, who knows, you might be serving angels and you don't even know it. The truth of the matter is, I think there are a lot more angels in the world than we know about. And a lot of them are sitting right here. And sometimes we can be less than angelic, but most of the time, our hearts are in the right direction. And we seek to serve one another. Can you imagine a world in which everybody takes care of everybody else? When we have problems, there are those who help us with our problems. And when we see others with problems, we are ready to help them with those problems. I remember one night several years ago, we lived in Blytheville, Arkansas, which is way up, dangerously close to Missouri. Not that far from Kentucky. But it was the night, that day, it was kind of around Thanksgiving. And that day, we had the funeral of my father-in-law. And Linda's brother was with us, and we were driving from Pine Bluff, Arkansas, way up in the northeast corner to Blytheville. And we went through Harrisburg, Arkansas, which was sort of prophetic because we would wind up living in Harrisburg a little bit later on. But we passed through Harrisburg, and we're going through the Crowley's Ridge country up there, hilly and all. I mean, they might call that a mountain, but we know what mountains are. And those are pretty small hills by comparison. Anyway, we were driving through, and there was a car that came up and was really close to the center line. It kind of pushed me off the side of the road a little bit. Well, there was a drop about that far from the pavement down to the dirt, and bounced off of that, bounced back up on the road, and kept going. And it wasn't too long before I realized the car was not steering exactly right. And there was this funny flapping noise going on up in the front, and so we had to pull over to the side, and it was pitch dark, out in the woods, nothing. Who had a flashlight? Not me. After Linda's brother gave me one, though, after this experience. And but there was a car that came up the road and saw us sitting on the side of the road. Well, it would be a real temptation, especially that time of day when it's dark, to just keep going. But they didn't. They stopped, and it was a whole family of folks. The point is that they sat there with their headlights shining while we changed the, I say it's an editorial we, actually my brother-in-law changed the flag. And, but the point was they stopped to help. They saw somebody in trouble and they stopped to help. And it might have been my inclination to keep going. So I thought, this takes some special folks to do that. But then I realized, no, that's the normal thing for people to do, is to stop and render aid, even if it's just shining your headlights on a flat tire so it can be changed, and that silly little thing can be put on to limp back home. People have a natural tendency to serve one another, don't they? And as I said, I'm talking to the choir here because I know most of you. Most of you are the kind of folks who would stop and render aid. Not only to somebody who had a flat tire, but someone who had any kind of a need. See, that's what Jesus teaches us to do. And that's what the writer of Hebrews, whoever that might be, some say, oh, it's Paul, of course. I don't know that. Knows anybody else? But the writer of Hebrews talks about helping each other, coming to each other's aid, serving one another. My dad, who was a real character, said one day that he was walking through the grocery store. And this is him, I'm telling you. And he said, everybody was so grumpy looking, grouchy, going about their business, shoving grocery carts down the aisles and all that. And he wondered, I wonder what happened if somebody smiled at these people. So he put a big smile on his face and walked through the store. He said, you know, people smile back. People smile back. Well, that's meeting a need, isn't it? Somebody's in a bad mood and someone smiles at them. Just to make the day brighter. Just to make the day better. We used to go to Mexico. Linda and I did. Oh, I don't know how many times we went. But we go with voluntary mission teams from Arkansas Conference Voluntary Mission, and Oklahoma VIM was the real arranger of those things. But we kind of piggybacked with them. And we would go to a place just south of the border, Mexico, called Rio Bravo. Rio Bravo is a city of about 100,000 people, and the vast majority of it is very steeped in poverty. And we would go to build houses in Rio Bravo. Now the houses that we would build, you and I would come home and we'd build one like that, probably to park our lawnmower in. 10 by about 16 feet, a tin roof, one room, no divisions, 2 windows, 2 doors. That was it. But when you stopped and looked at the houses that people lived in, you understood why that was such a big thing. Every time we would go to Rio Bravo, every time we would go to Mexico, anywhere, Linda went to Juarez one time, and that was an adventure in itself. But we would go and we would do this business of building houses. I'll bet you could put 8 or 10 of those houses in this building. And that was about how they were grouped. Each house had about 3 feet all around, you know. But everybody shared. And it was a neighborhood. And people understood what neighbors were then. I love this song, by the way. Yesu, Yesu, fill us with your love. Fill us with your love and to show us how to serve the neighbors we have from you. Every time, without exception, we would come away from Rio Bravo after a week building houses and associating with the folks and getting to know them, actually. Didn't speak a word of Spanish. Few of them spoke English, but we managed to somehow show neighborliness. We managed somehow to show love, not just by building them a house, but by serving God in that way. And you know, every time we would come home marveling at how much we had gained from those people. We'd go down there feeling pretty good about ourselves because we were going to go a roof over these folks' head, but we would come home with a lot more than a roof over our heads. We come home with changed lives and changed hearts. I think that's what the man talks about in Hebrews, the man or the woman talks about in Hebrews. I think that's what this little song is all about. Serving the neighbors that God gives to us and realizing in return that they serve us. One time we were building a house for a family, and it's kind of out in the country a little bit. And by the way, these houses we built were not free. It was all done through the Mexican version of Human Services. And they had to have a little money to put down. They had to have a piece of ground to build a house on. And we would get there, and the maestros, those who were in charge of the foreman of the project, who were native Mexicans and masters with hand tools, they would have the slab poured in the corner set. And I learned we learned to mix concrete on the ground. Well, all kind of things, wonderful things like that. So you need a cinder block wall built? You know, Linda and I will be out to help you build. But we went out into the country, and as we were nearing completion of the house, the young lady who lived in the house, the young mother of the family there, wanted to help us and serve us. And so she went in, and she came out with a tablecloth that was a little threadbare, but she spread it on a card table. She had a plastic Tupperware container full of sandwich cookies that some were broken, some were halves, you know how that is. And it struck me. And they have some I should say that because some of you may really like the coffee, but it's kind of odd for me. But she brought this out to serve us, and we all partook gratefully. And it occurred to me, so many times we look at what we have left after we get through with all the stuff that we think is important. We look at everything that we have left, and from that we give. But this woman didn't take into consideration what she had. She just brought what she had and gave from everything. Do you realize that that's the example that Jesus set for us? That's the example that Jesus set for us, giving everything that he had without concern for any kind of compensation. You didn't worry about who was going to. You heard the gospel story about Jesus says, when you have a banquet, invite the poor, invite the homeless, invite those that have nothing. And don't expect anything in return. See, that's when giving starts, I think. But the greatest gift that we can give is ourselves, isn't it? Don't you think? The greatest gift we can give is ourselves. There used to be a man, he passed away several years ago, but I just loved to listen to him on TV and read his books, and I've got a bunch of his books and read them several times. His name was Leo Buscaglia. Leo Buscaglia taught a course at UCLA on love. Now that's interesting. And it takes a lot of guts too. Teaches a thing about love, and he was talking one time about his nephew, or his niece rather, who was asking him. Leo was a psychologist of the highest order and just knew all kind of thing, real smart guy. But she asked him, what does a 4-year-old require? Leo thought a minute, and he said, air, food, shelter. That's what a 4-year-old requires. And he ended that little bit by saying, if you want to give the best gift that you can possibly give to anybody of any age, give yourself. Give yourself just like Jesus Give your soul. Neighbors are rich and poor, that old song says. Varied in color and race. Neighbors are near and far away. A few weeks ago we talked about the story of the Good Samaritan, this man who was left to die, and a Samaritan came along and took him in and took care of him and treated him until he was well. Samaritans, the most hated individuals that the Jewish community could come up with, and vice versa, I might add. But here is the Samaritan being neighbor to the man in the ditch. Neighbors are near and far away. Neighbors are people we don't even know. Neighbors are people we don't even like. Neighbors are people who have harmed us. Now this is what the scriptures say. This is not me talking. This is what the scriptures say. Neighbors are people we don't even like. People who have somehow possibly hurt us. People who have caused all kinds of chaos in our lives. These are our neighbors. These are the people that Jesus said, invite those people to the banquet. Invite those people to share. They are our neighbors too. And as Jesus was suspended on the cross that day, this to me is one of the most touching things of the whole Scripture. As Jesus was on the cross that day, there was a man over here on the left side. I don't know which side he was on. I'll just say the left side. And he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Now, he had already berated the other one over here for being so loud and ugly when they were hanging there on those crosses. And the other man was shouting to Jesus, if you are who you say you are, get us out of this. And the other one said, you have no shame. We're here because we deserve to be. He's not. And he turned to Jesus. He said, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, this day, before the sun sets, you will be with me. I think it's a promise that awaits all of us every day. See, the Samaritan experienced the presence of Christ when he reached into the ditch and pulled the injured Jew out. And as trivial and as simple and as it may be, those folks that stopped and shined their headlights on the flat tire were the presence of Christ at that moment. As you go about your daily lives, reaching out most of the time unknowingly into the lives of other people and drawing them close, you are the presence of Christ in the world at that moment. And that's our job. That's our job. You don't know what God looks like. You want to know what God's like? Look into the Gospels and read the stories of Jesus. That's what God's like. And he wasn't just showing off. He wasn't just walking around saying, look at me, see what I'm doing, all that kind of stuff, and healing folks and these kind of things. He was walking around living his life, setting that example, saying, these things that you see me do, you can do, and so much more. Something has occurred to me of late, and I don't know if I share this, and I just take it or leave it. It's occurred to me lately. that those Pharisees, those who tried Jesus and those who eventually led to his death, they were religious people. They were religious people. They lived by the rules. They knew they were right and everybody else was wrong. They had so many little rules they had to adhere to. They didn't even know what they were. They woke up in the morning behind because they didn't know what they were supposed to do. It used to aggravate me to death, especially when you got into graduate school, to go into a class the first day and find out, well, you're supposed to read 5 chapters, before you came to class. Nobody knew that. So you're behind before you even begin. That's what those poor Pharisees were every day. Every day. Every day. But you and I, we know the story. We have watched Jesus live and move and have his being among us. We see Jesus living and moving and having his being in our presence this very day. And if you want to see what Jesus looks like, look to the person on either side of you, and there Jesus is. Now, that's hard to comprehend. Some folks you look at it. Wrong. But by and large, Jesus is in our midst, in the hearts of each other. Can you imagine a world? Can you imagine a world where we just take care of each other? Everyone's needs are met. Everyone is loved and cherished. Everybody has everything they need. Jesus lived by a set of principles. He didn't live by religion. Jesus is probably the most irreligious person you'll ever encounter. He lived by a set of practices. A set of practices. And among those practices was forgiveness and mercy and love for all people. Love for enemies? My goodness. Who else practices that? Well, Jesus did. And that's what he expects you and me to practice. Mercy and love and forgiveness. Father, forgive them. They don't have a clue what they're doing. Now we do. Now we do. Jesus' example is an example of love and mercy and forgiveness and joy. Let us live it and be living sanctuaries for our God. Loving God, thank you. Thank you for the example that you have given us in your child, our brothers, Jesus. Help us to go out of this place of sanctuary into a world filled with needs and be your presence in that very world. In the name of the God who created us, who has walked among us, and who lives among us still,